Hello. Welcome back to the Space Gulag, otherwise known as PPSW, your favorite hangout place. Today we're back with another Star Wars story. Today we're doing What If Kenobi Joined Dooku? Because in the final hours of the Clone Wars, before they began, Obi-Wan Kenobi was offered by his master's master, Count Dooku, to join him. What would have happened had Kenobi joined Dooku during Attack of the Clones? Before we begin the story, special thanks to our patrons, voice actors, and everyone else part of the Pente Patrol team. If you want a chance to win in our next giveaway, watch to the end of the video and I'll tell you all about it. Our story begins inside of a small, stale room. Obi-Wan awakens to find that he's stuck, imprisoned by the bugs of this remote world. He didn't know what to think. His mind ran a bit rampant. He knew Master, now Count, Dooku, was here. Of course, could Dooku be as vile as it seemed? Obi-Wan had recently stumbled on a meeting between many different members of some sort of separatist alliance. While Obi-Wan was certainly a capable Jedi Master, he knew for a fact that he was a bit in over his head. He would have to find a way to escape this place, but it looked to be useless as an operation, as he continued spinning around on this little prison contraption. Obi-Wan would feel the presence of Dooku zero in closer and closer to him. Obi-Wan thought of Anakin, wondering if he were still able to transmit the information to the Jedi on Coruscant. If he wasn't able to, then Obi-Wan would be stuck here. Obi-Wan continued to spin around in circles, his mind still rampant as ever. He was thinking about Anakin, and what he could have been doing on Tatooine. His initial action was anger, but now that he was left to think about it for a moment, he knew that there had to be some reason why Anakin would have been on Tatooine. He was obviously upset at Anakin for disobeying him, but as he closed his eyes to ponder on Anakin, he felt darkness, and he also felt destruction, so much pain, death, and suffering. His thoughts were interrupted when the door to his cell opened up. Obi-Wan was facing the back of the room, but didn't need to see Dooku to know who it was. Dooku, of course, was the Jedi Master that instructed Qui-Gon Jinn, the master of Obi-Wan Kenobi. For Obi-Wan, it was a bit personal, interacting with the Jedi that abandoned the Order after Qui-Gon died. It felt very bittersweet and even remorseless. He didn't show up to the funeral, and by the time everyone returned, he was gone. He left the Order, the 20th Jedi Master to willingly leave the Order, otherwise known as a member of the infamous Lost 20. Dooku spoke up about how outrageous this was, that Obi-Wan was being treated accordingly. Obi-Wan, as charismatic as ever, demanded that Dooku stop playing games. Dooku always liked Obi-Wan. He was, after all, the apprentice of Qui-Gon Jinn, but Obi-Wan was also a great young man. He was brave, cunning, respectful, and even more dedicated than most Jedi within the Order. Someone that at a young age was shown to have a disadvantage, only to rise above the rest of his peers. Dooku would have trained Obi-Wan if Qui-Gon didn't, because Dooku saw potential. Dooku looked at Obi-Wan, a growing in beard similar to that of himself and that of Qui-Gon. Dooku pondered for a moment. He knew that his time was limited, and his cause wasn't aligned with the Jedi, but maybe the former apprentice of Qui-Gon would have had a similar ideal to his former master. Dooku looked up at Obi-Wan, and then realized there was the possibility for something. Then Dooku spoke. He realized if it would be worth a shot. He said to Obi-Wan that the Republic was under the control of a Sith Lord. Obi-Wan continued looking around, spinning, out of control, no control over his movement as he looked at the former Jedi as best as he could. Obi-Wan rebutted, saying that it was impossible. The Jedi would have felt the Sith's presence. Of course, that wouldn't be true, as Dooku reminded Obi-Wan that the dark side of the Force clouded everything, including the Order's judgment. Obi-Wan said he didn't believe Dooku, as he continued being spun around in circles. Dooku sighed, and then, for a moment, he thought. He really knew that if he could have Obi-Wan join him, it was one more individual to add to his ranks against Sidious. Of course, he had Ventress, but there was a little bit of doubt with her potential, with helping Dooku off Sidious. It was a long-term goal, but Dooku never really cared for the Sith way anyways, especially because his eyes never turned Sith yellow. His heart wasn't invested in it. He had political views on the galaxy, but he decided that he could remove the Sith from the galaxy and even the Jedi. But the offer would still be exposing the Sith and destroying them. Dooku then spoke up, asking if Obi-Wan remembered that Zabrak Sith assassin he'd killed on Naboo. Obi-Wan nodded his head and asked why Dooku would be bringing that up to him. Dooku told Obi-Wan that he was on Coruscant with the Dark Lord of the Sith before following Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon to Tatooine and then eventually back to Naboo. Never did Obi-Wan think about that. Dooku continued saying that the dark side was powerful, and it clouded their evil presence from the Jedi. Of course, Obi-Wan could choose to be a victim of the ensuing war the galaxy was about to see, but he could also survive and maybe even restore a new sense of balance to the galaxy. Obi-Wan thought momentarily. He realized he had the perfect opportunity to get behind enemy lines. Of course, having a war would be terrible, but if he could stick close to Dooku and learn the secrets of the Sith, he could then help rid the galaxy of the Sith. And maybe at the same time, Obi-Wan might be able to help Dooku return to the ways of the Jedi, teaching someone he had a lot of great respect for to come back to the light. Dooku stopped and looked at Obi-Wan, as their eyes met for a moment as Obi-Wan continued spinning around. Obi-Wan told Dooku that he would join him, even though he didn't believe in the reason for a galactic-scale war. Dooku looked at Obi-Wan and flipped the lever using the Force, releasing the Jedi Master as he fell to the floor and caught himself. Obi-Wan looked up to see a hand of Dooku reaching down to help him up. Obi-Wan looked at it, and then took it as he stood up next to Dooku. Obi-Wan's mind was rampant. He couldn't believe what he had just accepted, because it meant that he was abandoning the Order and his Padawan to go on recon without the Council's approval. But Obi-Wan remembered his master, and thought of what Qui-Gon might do in this situation, in any situation similar to this. Sure, even Obi-Wan had to disobey the Council from time to time, so that time might as well be now. Dooku smiled as he placed his hand on Obi-Wan's shoulder and guided him out of the room. Obi-Wan was very nervous as to where this was going, but Dooku knew the Republic would be here. The Clone Wars were on the verge of starting, so he would have Obi-Wan taken back to Sereno, then that would be where his training would begin. Dooku told Obi-Wan that he would be on Sereno after the Battle of Geonosis, speaking as quietly as possible, trying not to make sure that anybody else around them could hear them talking. The Clone Wars was orchestrated on both sides of the soon-to-be emerging conflict. Part of it would come from the Republic and the rest would come from the Separatists. Dooku told Kenobi that he would join him on Sereno after he visited his master. Dooku wanted this Battle of Geonosis to go by quickly, assuming that the Jedi would win the battle. Dooku knew of everything, the fact that Kenobi found Kamino, and he also knew that Master Yoda was currently there. The Prime Minister, Lama Su, informed Lord Tyrannus of the Jedi's arrival. Everything was turning out to seem like a trap for the Jedi to fall into, especially since Obi-Wan's transmission to the Jedi was intercepted. Dooku didn't want his new apprentice to be a victim of this first battle. For Kenobi, this would be good because he would be able to begin a log that he could present to the Galactic Senate and to the Jedi, proving that the Sith were behind everything. After Dooku sent Obi-Wan away to Sereno, he was informed by Jango Fett and a couple of other battle droids that a Jedi and a senator had been captured inside one of the main droid factories. Dooku didn't know why a senator of the Galactic Republic would be here. This was obviously an issue though. The Geonosians didn't take too kindly to having the Jedi and a senator sneaking around their factories, so they planned out a massive event. Newt Gunray and the rest of the members of the Trade Federation hierarchy were present on the planet. Of course, the Techno-Union and banking clans were here, but the Trade Federation had a bone to pick with this senator, formerly Queen of Naboo. She had evaded them, and this time she would be dealt with accordingly. In front of a massive crowd inside of the Pentaki Arena, or as the Geonosians knew it, the Arena of Justice. Within hours, Senator Amidala and Jedi Padawan Skywalker would be brought before the arena. Dooku watched as they looked puzzled, looking around at the hive of bugs surrounding them, and also noticing that Obi-Wan was not present. Anakin could feel that Obi-Wan was alive, but he wasn't really sure why he wasn't here, let alone not on the planet. Obi-Wan was off-world already, making his way to Sereno. He sat quietly inside of a shuttle, thinking, meditating, quietly. He had his lightsaber still, but he sat next to two super battle droids that sat as stiffly as they could without moving. Obi-Wan then had an array of feelings flood his mind, as he realized he might be stuck with the possibility of having to kill a Jedi. The thought sent shivers down his spine, and sent his heart rate into the sky. He couldn't imagine killing another Jedi. It made Obi-Wan question this entire operation. Maybe Dooku would let him get away, without bleeding his lightsaber crystal. But Obi-Wan knew from his early studies that the Sith would bleed their kyber crystals with that of a Jedi that they killed. The thought of being a Sith apprentice to Kenobi was awful, but he believed in his heart that he needed to do it for the greater good of the Republic. He cared about the Jedi and the people of the galaxy, and for Obi-Wan, he believed a cause was worth dying for if it could save the people of the Republic. But Obi-Wan had to be successful. Inside of the arena, a Nexu and Akale walked out of massive cages and walked towards Padme and Anakin, who were stringed up to chains to massive pillars. Without Obi-Wan, Anakin's main concern was Padme. As he looked over, he saw that she was using a hairpin to loosen the locks on one of her chains so that she could let herself up. The acolyte was heading towards her, while the Nexu made its way towards Anakin. This was tough luck for Padme. She had to make the best out of what she could. Anakin, on the other hand, noticed that Padme was able to take care of herself, so he focused on how he would make a fool out of this wild cat from Seleucami. The two beasts made their approach as Padme tried climbing the pillar in hopes that the beast from Felucia wouldn't pinpoint her and kill her. Not that she was trying to abandon Anakin, but he had the training and the force to escape this. Padme had to use her intuition as best as she could. As she climbed to the top, she watched as Anakin leaped up and avoided the Nexu, who lunged into the pillar. Anakin landed on top of it and kicked it in the head, knocking it out immediately. The acolyte got closer to the pillar Padme stood on top of. Anakin noticed that Padme would be in danger if she wasn't saved. Padme saw the acolyte get closer, and then, when Anakin began screaming at it, it turned and kicked the pillar that Padme was on top of as it toppled over towards Anakin's pillar. Padme jumped off in hopes of being saved as Anakin reached out with the Force as he held her up in the air. He tried lowering her down, but when the second pillar collided with his, he was thrown from his feet. He tried to keep a grip on her, but he let go as she dropped to the ground. She wasn't far from the ground, but hitting the ground was still a bit of a shock to her. She saw Anakin get whipped back and slam into the pillar behind him as he cried out in pain. The acolyte's attention turned from Anakin to Padme when she called out Anakin's name, trying to make sure that he was okay. When she noticed the beast was looking over at her, she turned and began running. The acolyte was much larger and faster as it used its 6 legs to follow closely behind her, before stabbing her through the back, killing her instantaneously. In the top deck, Newt Gunray laughed and high-fived one of the other Nemodians with him, in a celebration of her death. Anakin wavered as he stood to his feet, seeing the woman he just fell in love with impaled. He watched as the heart inside of his chest crushed into a million pieces. On the balcony, Dooku grinned. He never much cared for Anakin. He had an ego and a reputation of being a pain to teach. Dooku watched as the acolyte turned his attention to Anakin, and then the sound of lightsabers igniting caught his attention. Dooku turned around to see his old friend, Mace Windu, the current master of the Order. Dooku was quite delighted to see his old friend, as he turned and listened as Windu told Dooku that this party was over. Hundreds of lightsabers throughout the arena ignited as Geonosians began taking flight into the air, seeing that they had just been infiltrated. In fact, this party Windu spoke of, Dooku knew that the party had actually just begun. 5 or 6 super battle droids could be heard clanking down the hallway as Mace turned his attention from Dooku and prepared to block blaster fire. Instantaneously, fire rang out of the Mandalorian's armor as he shot his flamethrower at Windu. The Jedi Master leaped into the air and fell back down into the arena as he saw Skywalker running away from the massive beast to check on the Senator. Mace then noticed thousands of battle droids entering the arena, as Jedi across the arena entered combat, standing side by side, fighting with the droids and taking out as many as they could. The conflict was rambunctious, taking over the entire arena. Droids by the dozen fell, as Jedi, one by one, fell lifeless to blaster fire. Mace looked over and saw Skywalker. He was holding Padme in his lap, trying to see if she was still breathing. Behind him, the acolyte raised its massive claws, ready to strike down the Chosen One. As Windu used all of his might to throw the acolyte from his feet, Windu pulled a lightsaber from a Jedi passing by that tossed it to him and ran up to Anakin. The Jedi Padawan had tears streaming down his eyes as he held Padme in his arms. She wasn't breathing, and the wound left in her was wide enough to tell that there was no way she would return from this. Mace placed his hand on Anakin's shoulder to grab his attention, and he felt a surge of darkness radiate through his body. He saw Anakin's face as the Padawan turned around and looked into the eyes of Windu. with bloodshot eyes and a broken spirit as he gritted his teeth together. Windu got under Anakin's shoulder and helped him up, asking Skywalker to stick to his side. Anakin stood taller than Windu, as he was handed an extra lightsaber. Anakin ignited the blue blade as he and Windu stood back to back, fighting the thousands of battle droids that were now in the arena. The battle in the arena ensued for several minutes, as Jedi slowly dwindled in forces until they were surrounded by the battle droids. Only a handful of them left, most of them high-ranking Jedi, as Plo Koon and Ki-Adi-Mundi were put into the circle as hostages. Dooku stood above on his tower looking down. The battle claimed many lives, most of the living being Jedi, while the other only 2 was a bounty hunter by the name of Jango Fett, and of course, the senator from Naboo, Padme Amidala. The Jedi looked around as Dooku tried to proposition a protection for the Jedi, a trade barter if you will. Windu denied, as the Jedi took up defensive positions, as the sound of gunships rang over the arena, and the Jedi watched as the cloned gunships rained down from the skies, taking out several waves of battle droids. The Jedi ignited their weapons as they protected themselves, as the gunships wiped out several battle droids before making a landing perimeter, so that they could just get the Jedi inside of the gunships and make a great escape. As they did, Windu grabbed a hold of Anakin's shoulder and felt the radiating darkness again. He wanted to make sure Anakin got inside of the same ship as him. He also wanted to make sure that it wasn't an accident that he felt this darkness radiating off of Skywalker, the first time he felt it. In the gunship, Mace looked at Anakin and saw that he was still looking over the edge, looking down at the ground. He was still saying his final goodbye to Padme while she lay in the rubble of the battle that occurred within the arena. Mace placed his hand on Anakin again. He knew that Anakin was suffering. The time he spent with Padme on Naboo, he figured the boy got attached, and having his little contact with Anakin, Mace realized how truly similar the two of them were. Anakin was so close to turning to the dark side, and with Kenobi not having been found, it was assumed that he was captured indefinitely, and Anakin would have to complete his training and trials without a master, just like Obi-Wan had to do 10 years before. The gunships glided over the battlefield as multiple gunships began their landing sequence as waves of clones piled out and ran into battle against the forces of the droid armies. Anakin looked at Mace as the Jedi Master of the Order told him that once they landed, he would have to stick with him. Anakin wasn't sure why Mace was doing this, but he assumed that it was because Obi-Wan was still missing. But the truth was that Mace wanted to keep a close eye on Skywalker for the rest of the battle. Maybe it was compassion or curiosity, but Mace wanted to do it. Something in the Force was guiding him to keeping Skywalker close to him. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan sat inside of a shuttle as it began to make its landing sequence. He felt his heart heavy as ever. He could feel the multitude of deaths radiating from across the galaxy on Geonosis. He knew that there was a great lot of pain and suffering, and as the clones entered the battlefield, the great loss of life plagued the Force. Obi-Wan walked out of the shuttle as the two super battle droids instructed him to stay there. Obi-Wan then got down on the ground and began meditating. He needed to be strong within the Force if he wanted the opportunity to succeed in this op. If he wasn't careful, he'd be brought down into the pits of Korriban. Obi-Wan concentrated, and he allowed himself to be taken over as he waited for his new master to arrive. He waited several planetary rotations for Dooku to arrive. During that time, Obi-Wan reflected on his life, the journey through the temple, his missions with Qui-Gon, the woman with the most profound effect on his life, and the training of his own Padawan. Obi-Wan had a lot of reflection, and he used every single positive he'd ever experienced and focused on it, ensuring that they would cement him into the light side of the Force. A ship landed down behind Obi-Wan, as the steam brushed his hair across his shoulder, and he remained still. The super battle droid still stood next to him. Dooku walked down the ramp to see his student sitting there quietly without moving. Dooku demanded that Obi-Wan stand up and follow him, but Obi-Wan didn't move. He was so entrenched within the Force. The two battle droids told Dooku that he hadn't moved for the past few days. Dooku rubbed his beard and then stepped up to Kenobi, reaching down and tapping his shoulder. Kenobi didn't budge. Dooku decided that this would be a first lesson in the dark side, as he lifted his hands and shot lightning at him, as Kenobi rolled back and his eyes jolted open. The peace he was surrounded in was turned into pain as he looked at Dooku, who demanded that he rise to his feet. Obi-Wan gritted his teeth under his beard as he rose up to his feet, shrugging his shoulders. He was tense after being sat still for the past few days. Dooku guided Obi-Wan inside of the main palace. He had nothing to say regarding Anakin, because Anakin and him never had a duel. Dooku escaped the Battle of Geonosis, as the galactic front turned into a conflict that would catch the galaxy by storm. The Separatists were quick to move across the galaxy and make their moves on key systems like Christophsis and Ryloth. Obi-Wan had nothing to say about it. He just listened quietly, as Dooku spoke out about the war effort and everything they had to do to prepare his master's fall. Of course, Obi-Wan would have to learn the ways of the dark side, and Dooku wanted Obi-Wan to be a servant of that dark side. Obi-Wan didn't want to, but maybe, just maybe, he could fake it. So, he lied. The lie began, and he listened to everything Dooku told him. Obi-Wan played the game of Dark Apprentice, and made Dooku proud of him. Dooku knew of how hard and dedicated Obi-Wan was, and assumed that Obi-Wan was being truthful to him. Dooku would have to continuously travel off-world, leaving Obi-Wan behind to find himself. Obi-Wan would eventually have the chance to go off-world and do little missions for Dooku. Though Dooku wanted Obi-Wan to bleed his crystal, Obi-Wan continuously found ways to avoid doing so. Though for Obi-Wan, he did see a significant growth in his power within the Force. It made him wonder what would have happened if he were trained as a Jedi by Dooku. But he had no time to worry about that. He was struggling to stay attached to the light side of the Force. Obi-Wan never struggled. He was always able to stay attached to the light, but this was testing everything about him. Being away from Dooku was almost good for Obi-Wan. If Kenobi was left on Sereno, he would gather information. The only issue is that he couldn't get the information off-world. He wanted to inform the Jedi Order about his doings of the Separatists, and all the transmissions off of Sereno were being blocked from the surface. So, Obi-Wan had little opportunities when he wasn't on the surface, but for the most part, he was being sent to remote worlds of the Sith to recover artifacts for his master. And while he was doing that, he was escorted by a group of Magna Guards to ensure that he didn't try and contact the Jedi. Inside the Jedi Order, things had changed. While Anakin graduated into becoming a knight, instead of being thrown at the front lines, he was kept inside the Jedi Temple. Mace Windu wanted to make sure that the Chosen One was okay. He had been through a rough time and having to watch Padme die, his mother die, and which Mace came to learn after Geonosis, and eventually his master, completely missing. Mace decided that because Anakin lost so much, he would take him under his wing. When he felt the dark side emanating from Anakin, he knew that Anakin had the potential to use Vapad to an extent. Mace didn't want Anakin near the front lines until he knew that Anakin would be stable enough to lead a division of men. This meant that Mace had to teach Anakin how to use Vapad. It wouldn't be arduous or even that hard for Anakin to obtain the power of Vapad. He was a natural, and it caught Mace by surprise, because he'd spent an entire life crafting the ability to harbor both the light and the dark side of the Force without breaking the Jedi Code. But maybe Mace should have taken interest in Anakin before he lost everyone he cared about. On the bright side, with the help of Windu's teachings and the aid of Master Yoda finding and giving young Skywalker his very own apprentice, Anakin began to thrive. While most of the Order was very iffy about it, and even the Jedi Master who'd spent a couple weeks training Anakin in Vapad, it was decided by Yoda that the youngest, most rambunctious Padawan of her class, who passed her trials early, should be given to Anakin. Her name was Ahsoka Tano, and Yoda foresaw that the two of them would mesh really well together. It took time for Anakin to learn this new lightsaber form until he was immediately dispatched to Christophsis with his new Padawan in tow. Going with him, he would be placed with Jedi Master Kit Fisto. Two separate Jedi cruisers were being sent to take down an armada outside of the planet of Christophsis. Leading this armada was a recognizable admiral by the name of Trench. With a tough resistance, Anakin and Kit Fisto were able to use a cloaking ship to destroy the command ship of the fleet and free up some room for reinforcements to get to the ground so that they could fight the Separatists on Christophsis. Meanwhile, on Creuss II, an ancient planet of the Sith, Obi-Wan was learning more about them. In a way, it widened his understanding of the Force. He was still tied to the Jedi, but he realized that there was more that the Force could do, and it wouldn't inhibit him or stop him from being a Jedi. Obi-Wan came to learn more about the Force and understand the capabilities of what Dooku was talking about back on Geonosis. Though this Kenobi realized he could trick Dooku and play his own game. There was a power the Sith used, and it was to cloak their darkness. Obi-Wan thought he could reverse it, and use it to cloak his light. If he used it, it would be the inverse of what this Lord Sidious was apparently doing to the Republic. Obi-Wan knew he couldn't keep the charade up much longer. While he enjoyed sparring with Ventress and the little bit of banter he had with the general of the droid army, General Grievous, Obi-Wan knew he needed to get out of this before he was ordered to bleed his lightsaber crystal. He never wanted to hurt anyone for this covert op. He was just buying as much time as possible, but he wasn't really all that useful, considering Obi-Wan was not a part of the Galactic Republic army when they received the Clone Army. If he was, Dooku could have demanded information on battle strategies, tactics, and weak points for the Republic. Instead, Obi-Wan was able to go out into the galaxy. The Magna Guards were the most fun out of any of these missions for Obi-Wan. They were the only other protection that wasn't the light side of the Force as well. The ancient Sith temples were full of information, but the Sith ghosts were not pleased to know that a Jedi was infiltrating their location. Sidious felt the disturbance, but every time he asked, Dooku said that it was Ventress gathering holocrons for Sidious. While Sidious wasn't stupid, he allowed Dooku to play this game. intending to use whichever apprentice that Dooku was training to kill Dooku, and then Sidious would have Anakin kill that apprentice. A domino effect of suffering, and it was all for the good of one man, Sheev Palpatine. The Sith were vile, and Sidious was ready to bring the galaxy down for this. He planned out his deceit of the Jedi. While he allowed his apprentice to gather information he didn't have time to go after. Obi-Wan really enjoyed being out and learning. He grew in his power, and he himself was beginning to teeter. He wasn't entirely falling into darkness, but he was being guided away from the light. The meditation he had done months prior was the only thing keeping him grounded. He was never allowed to find peace around Dooku, and especially not on the home worlds of the former Sith. Obi-Wan was consistently under op, and he was trying his best to hide himself from the truth. Obi-Wan was followed closely as he walked into the main temple on Korriban, and searched intricately. He was being sent out for another holocron that involved the likes of some ultimate power. Of course, not even the Sith had that, but Dooku was planning the downfall of his master, and it wouldn't be easy of a task to accomplish. Obi-Wan found himself entrapped by the Sith as he walked by the tombs of some of the most legendary Sith he'd ever heard about during these few months under Dooku. And then he saw one that all the Jedi knew by name, Darth Bane. Obi-Wan encountered an apparition of the former Sith Lord as he looked at the towering cloud of darkness that began speaking to him in riddles. Obi-Wan knew it was deceit, but the Sith Lord began accusing Kenobi of the truth, the fact that Obi-Wan was no true Sith. Sidious, on the other side of the galaxy, could feel this, and he moved himself to his altar to see who was behind Sith lines, trying to locate the information of the Sith. Kenobi was able to shoo away the Sith ghost as he carried on into the musky, darkened halls of the Sith, as the Magna Guards used their staves to light the way for Kenobi. As Obi-Wan walked down, he saw a tomb of another Sith. He walked over to it and investigated it. Looking under the tomb, Obi-Wan used the Force to open a lever as a small holocron popped out. Obi-Wan grabbed it and dusted it off with his hand as he looked at it. The holocron glowed in his hand. While he kept it, Kenobi turned around as the Magna Guards grabbed at his elbows, lifting him up. Obi-Wan went to the wrong tomb. He needed to go across the way. Of course, Obi-Wan knew he went for the wrong tomb, but he figured that he might as well take advantage of the time he had here. Any information he could get his hands on would be more for him to use against the Sith. On the other side of the galaxy, Anakin and Ahsoka were getting well acquainted, as the 501st returned back to Coruscant after another deployment. Anakin spent time with Windu, who befriended him after the first battle in Geonosis. While Mace was much like Skywalker, and consistently on the front lines, both Master of the Order and Jedi Master would spend time sparring and learning more about one another. Anakin was still heartfully crushed about the loss of Padme, Obi-Wan, and his mother. Ahsoka was a little bit of joy he had anywhere. Of course, Anakin was especially prescient on trying to have the Council search for Obi-Wan, but that issue, the Council was already trying to do. He was a great member of the Order, someone that probably would have been admitted into the High Council, but the war effort deterred them from being able to find him. The Republic was already planning to besiege Geonosis a second time, but that was about a year away from now, until the Republic could even get that deep into Separatist territory. As for the other place Kenobi could be, no Republic recon reported seeing him on Sereno, Cato Nemonia, or any of the other Separatist allied capital planets. Yoda believed that Kenobi was being guided by the Force, but within recent weeks, his future was clouded by darkness. Anakin was concurrently worried about Obi-Wan. Something that was consistently brought his heart to joy was being able to tell Ahsoka all about his former master. She loved hearing stories about Obi-Wan, and Anakin going out on crazy adventures across the galaxy as they tried to overcome several disadvantages they faced, falling into nests of large beasts, and negotiating their way out of combative situations. Sometimes it kept Anakin up all night. Not like the sounds of bombardments and cannons sounding every night helped him sleep or anything. Ahsoka was the perfect balance for this. She gave Anakin something else to focus on, someone to keep his mind off the combative state of mind he existed in. Anakin began rudimentary training for Ahsoka, which would drive her to be her best, slowly getting more and more hard. Ahsoka rose through her training and progressed incredibly well. Part of Anakin wanted to just forget about the entire war effort and run away, but now he had responsibilities. Maybe that was the purpose of Yoda giving Anakin, the student, but he couldn't tell. Even Master Yoda knew that for Anakin, it would be easier for him to accept an apprentice rather than let her go. For Kenobi, he was requested to go to the moon across from Mandalore. He was being sent there to do a mission with someone by the name of Pre Vizsla. Kenobi didn't know this Vizsla guy, but he did know that he was going to be around Mandalore. It was odd. Dooku may have just chosen the mission specifically for him because of the extended mission he took on Mandalore as a Padawan. But there wasn't much Dooku knew of that mission he took with Qui-Gon all those years ago. He just assumed that Kenobi's familiarity with the planet might aid the Separatists. As Kenobi landed, he realized he was interacting with a group of terrorists, known as the Death Watch. Obi-Wan began to avoid conflict for the longest time, but now he realized he was running out of time. Though there was a chance he could still do some good here. He didn't want to ruin the peaceful work of Satine. She turned a warrior society into one of the most peaceful planets in the galaxy, neutral for the galactic conflict. She had done so much positivity, and Obi-Wan was terrified of having to ruin something Satine had spent her lifetime dedicated to. Obi-Wan first met Pre Vizsla, and could immediately tell what kind of person he was. Vizsla was a proud Mandalorian, someone with quite a bit of ego, but fragile as a real warrior. He hid behind tracks of his own tricks before trying to win in a proper duel. Vizsla was very welcoming to Kenobi, but he was very sinister, and his motives were just as well. He just wanted his own power, and there would be nothing from stopping him from doing so. Vizsla began speaking about the Death Watch's plans for killing Satine in an assassination attempt. Obi-Wan's heart was rattled, but he kept up the look of confidence to make the ever-so-eager Pre Vizsla feel confident in Dooku's apprentice. Dooku's motivation was to have another Separatist planet, while Death Watch was obviously trying to take over the planet. Kenobi played the game as he continued spending months with the members of Death Watch, as he became immersed in their warrior society. Pre Vizsla would eventually prepare the troops as he got the Mandalorians ready for their assault on the people of Mandalore. Without a true strategist, Kenobi was being used as a gift from Dooku to help lead an assault on the capital city. Obi-Wan used his time to prepare a strike team, and an assault that would completely fail when going against the Mandalorian guard of the capital city. Pre Vizsla had the plan to go in and kill Satine in her throne room, and Kenobi couldn't get him to deny doing it. Obi-Wan thought deeply on this matter. Pre Vizsla was going to kill Satine, and then prop up Olmec as an understudy leader of some sort. But that didn't matter. Today was the day. Mandalore would reclaim its warrior status, so they loaded up into their shuttles and moved into space. Within the hour, they were inside of the capital city. Bo-Katan took her group of Death Watch members out into the city as Pre Vizsla, alongside of his advisor from Dooku, Obi-Wan Kenobi, broke into the throne room. Obi-Wan watched Pre Vizsla stare down Satine as she sat quietly, demanding her personal guard to stand down. Obi-Wan looked into the eyes of Satine as she realized that Kenobi was here. She knew vaguely about Obi-Wan's disappearance, but when she saw Obi-Wan behind Pre Vizsla, her heart shattered into two. She obviously believed that Obi-Wan joined the wrong side. Both her and Obi-Wan watched as Pre Vizsla ignited the darksaber and walked towards her. Obi-Wan stepped forward as the two Mandalorians grabbed his shoulders as they tried to hold him back. Obi-Wan revealed a hidden lightsaber as he cut down the two Mandalorians behind him, despite Satine's demands to keep the throne room a monetary place of peace. Pre Vizsla wasn't paying attention as he lifted his blade over his head and swung down at Satine. She didn't blink or even move, as her eyes watched Kenobi kill the two men behind him as he reached his hand out with the Force to stop the blade before it met Satine. Pre Vizsla was pulled back as he landed on his back. Satine smiled. She knew Obi-Wan couldn't have been this vile. But then Pre Vizsla yelled out the word traitor as he turned around towards Kenobi and raised his blasters and started to fire at Kenobi. Obi-Wan hadn't been using his blade, but he was still experienced as he blocked the blaster shots. As he and Pre Vizsla got closer and closer, the darksaber and a lightsaber collided with one another, as Kenobi and Pre Vizsla collided blades in the middle of the throne room. As they fought back and forth, Obi-Wan drew from the balance he found within himself as he moved back, allowing Pre Vizsla to take the advantage before losing it, when Kenobi sliced into his jetpack. Pre Vizsla tumbled as he threw the pack off of his back, as multiple Mandalorians flooded the room to watch this duel. Obi-Wan and Vizsla bounced back and forth, as Obi-Wan ran his blade through Pre Vizsla's stomach. He caught the darksaber as he watched Pre Vizsla fall to the ground. Obi-Wan felt a surge of darkness rise in his heart after killing Pre Vizsla. As he heard the voice of Satine, he turned around and dropped both blades as he opened his arms to hug her. He was knocked off of his feet by a firm slap. Obi-Wan looked up at Satine and asked what that was for. She grinned, saying that she didn't want any fighting in the throne room, as she got down to his level and put her arms around him. They embraced one another, and then she helped him back up as the Mandalorians in the room walked and kneeled before them. Obi-Wan was the new holder of the Darksaber, but as Obi-Wan saw the Mandalorians debate their decision of kneeling to a non-Mandalorian or betraying him, Obi-Wan took the blade and held it up into the air. He said that because Satine was able to knock him off his feet and made him yield to her, she therefore was the new holder of the Darksaber. The Mandalorians all looked at one another as they accepted the resolution. While it wasn't a true duel, she did technically beat Kenobi and knock him off of his feet. Obi-Wan handed the Darksaber to her as the Mandalorians all continued kneeling. While they didn't all care for Satine, she did hold the Darksaber. Of course, anyone could challenge her, but they stayed silent. It was obvious that Obi-Wan would have her back, even though it was against the rules. Satine told Kenobi that she didn't want to hold this blade, but she would for her people, both those of peace and warrior class. Satine spoke up and told the room that she would be the leader they desired, while bringing a new era of peace to Mandalore. They all rose from their feet as Satine returned to her role as a leader, demanding that they all reach out to the people that were recently terrorized during the attack of the Death Watch. She told them that she would find a way for them to rejoice in their warrior pasts, while contributing to the greater society. Satine then grabbed Obi-Wan's hands as she pulled him along with her, as they started asking each other about where they'd each been and what they'd been going through. She knew that for a fact Obi-Wan had been missing from the Order for an entire year. She was extremely worried about him, and she was so happy to see him alive. Obi-Wan held on to her hand as tight as he could, as he told her that he was captured and made a deal so that he could go undercover behind the Sith lines and report it back to the Senate and to the Temple. He then confessed that he would like to be with her. That is, if she felt the same way for him. Satine stopped and smiled at him as she placed her hand on his face. His beard was scraggly. It hadn't been well taken care of, especially since he had been off-world and doing missions all over the sort. She said maybe if he shaved the beard off, sarcastically, as she pulled him close. The two of them locked eyes, and they just held each other quietly. Over the next few hours, Satine and Obi-Wan would talk about everything that had happened in the past few years of both of their lives. Satine had been a true leader, and taken the mantle of the Mandalorian throne, while Obi-Wan had been captured and was working undercover. He didn't have a lot of time this day because, with the death of Pre Vizsla, he had to make sure that Dooku saw it as an operational failure rather than a betrayal. Obi-Wan spent the remainder of the day with Satine, and promised her that when he finished his mission, he would be back to Mandalore to spend the rest of his life with her. While he was able to stay true to the code while out and about, being faced with the Sith and adversity, it wasn't the code that kept him grounded. Rather, it was the memories of her that helped him resist the urge of darkness. And with her ruling Mandalore, there was always a chance for the planet to succeed. Obi-Wan did suggest that, given the warrior-like Mandalorians, they needed a role so that they could feel that they weren't having the need to rebel against her, as she said that she had an idea, some sort of gladiatorial type of entertainment, so that they could rejoice in their past, but also give entertainment to the people. Regardless, Obi-Wan and Satine decided that they would begin their life together when Obi-Wan returned, but for now, Obi-Wan had to go back to Serenno. He would have to explain why or how the Mandalorians failed to overthrow their government. Dooku wouldn't be mad at Obi-Wan, because he was only meant to be an advisor, and the Mandalorians were meant to be the ones to complete the mission. Upon Obi-Wan's return to Serenno, he found that Dooku wasn't present. He took advantage of Dooku's trust and traveled into the palace to scavenge for information. He wanted to get everything else he needed. Obi-Wan had recorded every political discussion Dooku had with him, but there was a little missing. That was where this Sidious was operating out of. If he ruled over the Republic, then where could he be if not Coruscant? Obi-Wan traveled deep into the records, stashed by Dooku's personal droid, the same droid that piloted his solar sailor. The droid was programmed to log all of the traveling routes and distances Dooku took. It was just something that Serenno commissioned to make sure that the Count of Serenno was using the ship for the right reasons. No one really ever checked it out, but Dooku never had the programming taken out of the droid, so it was just left to continue doing its task of recording data. Obi-Wan found the record book and searched throughout it, finding the travelogue of Dooku's solar sailor. The ship had been all across the galaxy, but there were several trips that went to the industrial sector on Coruscant. Obi-Wan was able to pinpoint the location as he gathered all the information he could. Kenobi then found something odd. It was some sort of chip prototype that was designed by the Kaminoans. It was odd to Kenobi. He saw the entire clone army almost a year before on Kamino. But what could these inhibitor chips... As Kenobi continued, he saw something about an order to wipe out the Jedi. It all clicked. As Obi-Wan got all the images of what he saw, he then ran out of the archive room when he heard the Solar Sailor landing. Kenobi couldn't go anywhere else, so he ran to the throne room and got onto the ground and waited quietly for his master to return. Obi-Wan reached into his belt and took out the holocron that Dooku had requested. When Dooku entered the room, he saw the holocron being held out as he pulled it towards him with the Force. Obi-Wan grinned and listened as Dooku praised the work he did to get a hold of the holocron. Dooku sat down across from the throne room as he spoke to Kenobi. He told Obi-Wan that there was one more step closer to taking a hold of the power that they needed to kill Sidious. It had been a while, so Dooku stood back up and walked around his desk and ignited his blade. Obi-Wan did the same. His blade had not been bled yet, but Obi-Wan learned how to conceal the light to Dooku. As his lightsaber looked crimson, Dooku applauded Obi-Wan for bleeding his lightsaber. The two then clashed in the middle of the throne room, as Obi-Wan moved around patiently. Dooku moved forward as Obi-Wan parried twice and then pushed back on the third swing. Dooku was impressed. He played nicely as he allowed Obi-Wan to feel the advantage he was given. Dooku gave Obi-Wan too much room, and then after 3 more strikes and a parry and a spin around, Kenobi had Dooku beat. Surely it was surprising, but even Dooku knew the profound effect of the dark side of the Force. Dooku then told Kenobi that he would have one more mission for him soon. First, he would have to go back to Coruscant and meet with his master. Obi-Wan was interested, and asked when he would be able to learn more about the Sith Lord. Dooku shook his head and told Obi-Wan that he'd have to be as patient with his knowledge as he was with lightsabers. Dooku was hard on Asajj, Grievous, and everyone else he interacted with, but he really did have a soft spot for Kenobi, as he patted Obi-Wan on the shoulder and walked past him to go to his ship. Dooku had to be back on Coruscant, but he stopped on Sereno to gather the holocron from Kenobi before taking it to his master on Coruscant. Obi-Wan nodded as he waited for Dooku to leave the room and enter his ship. Obi-Wan watched as the Solar Sailor departed the system as he grinned. It was time for the Sith to fall. The Clone Wars were at its height, and there was a chance for redemption. In the second year of the war, the Republic and Separatists were trying to get a peace treaty within the galaxy. It was about to work, too. Ahsoka Tano guided Bail Organa to a Separatist planet to meet with one of Padme Amidala's old friends. Her name was Mani Bonteri. She had been friends with Padme before Padme's death on Geonosis, decided that the galaxy could find itself at peace if they united together to put down the evil war that sat between the two opposing sides in the galaxy. Mina would have to talk to the Separatist government to make sure that they could agree to have peace talks with the Galactic Republic. Tyrannus wasn't exactly thrilled, but he agreed to it because it was a proxy democracy until the Sith won. Of course, Mina would be executed and the Sith would conjure a plan to make the Separatists look like warmongers, but first he had to meet with Sidious before they did any of that. Obi-Wan waited for Dooku to depart the system, and when the ship was out of sight, Kenobi ran into the hangar bay and found himself a starfighter named the Soulless One. Obi-Wan looked around. It was Grievous' starship, and it meant that the good general was also on the ground. Dooku hadn't given Grievous orders for the sabotage of the peace talks, so he was still awaiting orders from his master. He turned around to see Kenobi and asked if Obi-Wan was ready for the peace talks to come to an end. Obi-Wan nodded as he smiled at Grievous. The general was unsuspecting as he turned around to get inside of the ship when a blue lightsaber lit up inside of his chest and he was pulled back out of him. Grievous choked on his breath as he turned around to see Kenobi jump into his ship and close the cockpit. Obi-Wan took Grievous' ship into the atmosphere and set the coordinates to Coruscant and jumped into lightspeed. While in lightspeed, he contacted the Jedi Temple frequency. Inside of the command center of the Jedi Temple, he saw 3 Jedi, who were curious to see who was contacting their secret frequency. Plo Koon, Adi Gallia, and Anakin Skywalker were standing in the room, looking at Kenobi with shock drawn across their faces. They couldn't believe he was still alive. Obi-Wan looked at Anakin and saw that his hair had grown. He wasn't wearing a Padawan braid, and it was evident he was no longer a Padawan. Obi-Wan was incredibly proud of Anakin, but he then looked at Plo and Adi Gallia, as he told them to get a hold of any other Jedi Masters inside of the Jedi Temple. It was an emergency. They had the opportunity to wipe out the Sith. Anakin ran from the room. His emotions were out of balance. He was so happy to see that his master was still alive. He had been so worried about him for the longest time, and now there was a chance for Obi-Wan and him to reunite and enjoy spending time together like they had before the war. Anakin was filled with emotion, but he ran to the council chambers to get a hold of the council, requesting that Windu, Shakti, Kit Fisto, Yoda, and Eth Koth all come down to the command center. They all saw Kenobi, and he was sitting there still talking about the plan. The Jedi were so shocked to see that Obi-Wan, even though the initial shock of Anakin grabbing them had passed. Obi-Wan had to say hi to all the Jedi Masters as he apologized for his radio silence. But he explained that he had all the information to convict the Sith of starting the Clone Wars and preparing an initiative to wipe out all the Jedi. While Kenobi hadn't contacted the Dots back to the Chancellor, he told the Jedi that all the information they needed was inside of Grievous's ship that he was currently flying. Eventually, Obi-Wan arrived at a hyperspace over Coruscant and flew down to the city. As he got close, as a Republic gunship flew towards the industrial sector, Obi-Wan found the building that the Sith were located in as he led the gunship to that location, landing beside the Solar Sailor. The Jedi and the gunship had no room to land, so they jumped out of the ship into the building. Several Jedi Masters were present as Obi-Wan jumped out of Grievous's starship and ran over. He saw Anakin and pulled him in for a massive hug before he turned around and saw the other Jedi as they steadily moved forward. Mace Windu led a bunch as Yoda followed slowly behind. Obi-Wan, Anakin, Adi-Gallia, Kit Fisto, Shaak Ti, Plo Koon, and Eth Koth were all walking towards as the two Sith Lords turned around, feeling the massive surge of light in the Force. They saw the Jedi, and Sidious wanted to kill Dooku instantaneously. It was obvious that this was Dooku's fault, but he would have to be dealt with later if the Sith survived this ordeal. Lightsabers of all colors ignited as Dooku growled. He was going to kill Kenobi if it was the last thing he could do. But the Sith had to be patient. They looked around and steadied themselves as Sidious picked out all the targets. He knew of which Jedi he would have to kill first, and he knew which ones he would have to struggle with. Eth Koth was the first Jedi to be slain, as Sidious used an ancient Sith howl to bounce across the room and begin his duel with the Jedi. As Eth Koth dropped to the floor lifelessly, Anakin swung at Sidious. The Dark Lord defensively moved back as he kicked Anakin's legs out from under him. Dooku, on the other hand, began dueling with Adi-Gallia, as Kit Fisto took up defense against the Sith apprentice. Sidious moved against Plo Koon, who defended Anakin. The two fearsome duelists moved back and forth, as Shaak Ti moved into attack position. Sidious cut off Plo's non-dominant hand, while sweeping a deep cut into Shaak Ti's thigh. Mace moved in as he pushed Sidious back. Dooku on the other side of the room cut down Adi-Gallia as Kenobi moved in to help Kit Fisto. Dooku dueled back and forth, staying on the offensive, using all of his rage and anger he had to press an assault. Dooku swung, cutting through Fisto's shoulder as he fell back in pain, and with two incredibly fast strikes, he used lightning to push Obi-Wan off balance as he drove his blade into Obi-Wan's stomach. Anakin saw this from across the room, as Yoda felt Anakin's pain and tried to stop him. Dooku turned around, preparing to kill Fisto, when Anakin kicked Dooku's blade out of his hand as he swung around and cut through Dooku, killing him instantaneously. Anakin turned around and got beneath Obi-Wan as he held his former master in his arms. Mace, Plo, and Yoda, on the other side of the room, pushed their assault on Sidious, eventually killing him, as their combined power was way too much for Sidious to handle. Fisto ran over to Anakin to see if he was alright and see if Obi-Wan was okay, while Mace helped Shaak Ti get to her feet and got under her arm and helped her walk. Anakin held Obi-Wan's hand as he told his master to stay with him, tears falling down his eyes onto Obi-Wan's robe. Kenobi looked up as he gripped Anakin's hand. Obi-Wan saw Qui-Gon in the corner of the room. With his hand, he reached out. Obi-Wan then looked back to Anakin and told him that he was proud of his former apprentice. Anakin had come so far in such a short period of time. Obi-Wan lifted up his free hand and placed it gently on Anakin's face. He told Anakin that he had become a far greater Jedi than he himself could have ever become. Anakin smiled as another tear fell out of his eye. His heart shattered. Obi-Wan then told Anakin that he would always be here as he placed his hand on Anakin's heart, and then his breath began to shallow out as his head fell back and limp, as Anakin cried out for Obi-Wan. As the Jedi all crowded around, placing their hands on Anakin's back, as he watched Obi-Wan's body vanish into the Force, Anakin cried out, asking his master not to go. But he was gone. Anakin's hand closed on itself as he watched his former master disappear within his arms. Anakin's hands met with his face as the empty robes of Obi-Wan fell onto his lap. He couldn't accept the death of his master. Yoda came around to Anakin's side as he stood next to the Jedi. They both looked over and saw Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon standing next to each other, illuminated in blue. Anakin's mouth dropped as he saw both the Jedi, who stood to be father figures to him, in front of him. Within the next coming days, the Jedi would realize that Palpatine was the Sith Lord, and they could help the Republic and Separatists find peace with one another. After a year of combat, the Republic and Separatists would begin peace talks, as the Republic elected an interim Chancellor, Bail Organa, a unanimously liked politician on both sides of the political atmosphere, and he could help the Republic bring peace. Inside of the Jedi Temple, Anakin, Ahsoka, the entire Council, and many others, including an outsider in Duchess Satine, would be present as the Order buried Obi-Wan Kenobi. Satine would be able to go into Obi-Wan's room and take a little reminder of him with her, after explaining to Master Yoda what he promised to her before his death. Satine would take his lightsaber and his Padawan braid. She brought the lightsaber back and made both the lightsaber of Kenobi and the darksaber integral pieces of Mandalore society, because months later, she would have Obi-Wan's daughter, named Astrid Obi-Wan Kryz. The Republic would recover, and the Jedi would go back to being peacekeepers in the galaxy. The clones would all have their inhibitor chips removed, as they were all granted freedom to go out into the galaxy and live the lives they deserved to live. Anakin would train Ahsoka into knighthood, and he would be welcomed into the High Council and accept this position. His bond with Mace helped him find resolve, and Obi-Wan would consistently be present in his life as a Force ghost. But it wouldn't end there. Obi-Wan would spend his time with the love of his former life, and rejoice in seeing Satine and their child together. As Satine continued to bring a new legacy to Mandalore, as the planet thrived without terrorists, and a new popular sport in gladiatorial ancient combat. Astrid would grow up, being trained by her aunt Bo-Katan, who made amends with Satine. But Astrid would also learn the political game as she watched her mom take up the nickname that Obi-Wan once held, the Negotiator of the Republic. Satine mediated and brought Mandalore into the reinstated Republic of Peace. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to George Shore, Benjamin Wells, Jay Hoffman, Warpigman308, Icy Raptor, Gort, and Chancellor Lauren Sanders for supporting the channel. Let's hit 2,000 likes on this so we can see what if Anakin Skywalker was granted the rank of Master. If you want to see a what if, let me down below. I read all the comments about doing crossovers. Check out the Twitch, community Discord, and Patreon to be a part of the community, support me in other ways. And if you want to learn how to win our Discord or win our next our giveaway, go down below. There's a pinned comment. It's going to have the giveaway doc. You put your name on the giveaway. We're doing this for 50,000 subscribers. I haven't decided if it's going to be 3 lightsabers or 5. I'll let you guys know in the coming months as we get closer, or coming weeks, whenever it is that we get closer to 50,000 subscribers. But get ready for the next giveaway. Anyways, let's talk about our story here. I'm really excited about this one. I'm honestly really excited to have it done. I wrote this one for 2 days, and I kind of had like a writer's block when I was writing it. I just continuously struggled with writing it, and I kind of like, I'm not gonna lie, at one point, it's actually in the bloopers of this video, I forgot that Padme died on Geonosis because I wrote this on one day, and then I continued writing it on another day. So I brought her up with her friend, the Bontiri woman, the mother of Lux, right? And I had Padme interact with them, and then I was reading it, and I was like, hold on. That doesn't sound right because she died on Geonosis. So, and I didn't catch that till I was like almost finished with the entire reading. But regardless, I'm really happy with how the story turned out. I think the story was a little interesting, and I think it had some slow parts in it. I'll be completely honest, because Obi-Wan is a hard character to do. He's a very hard character to do unless you're doing a what if specifically on him turning to the dark side. I don't see him turning to the dark side. That's just not within his nature. If you watch him, he's only had one issue with ever turning to the dark side, and that was the first time he fought Maul when he fought with Asajj Ventress. It was that one time that he fought Maul before he, was like, this isn't worth it. It's not worth losing everything that I have fought for, that I have worked for, to just be evil, And it was at that moment that Obi-Wan really cemented himself as a Jedi. And it's hard to do a what if about Obi-Wan being on the dark side without it specifically being what if Obi-Wan was turned to the dark side. So I know people are going to expect Obi-Wan to be this dark menace of society, but it's not within his character. His character would be like, wait, I can do something really cool with this. I could go undercover and I could just be like, yeah, I'm going to trick you, Dooku, and you're not going to notice it until it's too late. The sad part is Kenobi did die, but I think his heroic sacrifice was to that of the Republic. I think Obi-Wan would have gladly sacrificed himself to the Republic. Now, I know I get this all the time. Plo Koon probably could have beat Sidious one-on-one. Shakti probably could have beat him one-on-one. Kit Fisto isn't losing to Dooku that easily, and neither is Adi Gallia. But you have to see, there has to be tension. I can't just make it, it's not fun without tension. I know some of you guys have issues with that kind of stuff, but from a storytelling perspective, from someone that's telling you the story, it's not as interesting, at least from my point of view, to just have someone just get sweeped. I don't think you guys would like that. I don't think it would be fun if you just saw these guys go in there and it's just dead. It's like, that's not fun. There's no tension there. And I want you guys to have tension, you know? Who's gonna die? You know, I have Plo Koon lose his hand. Shaak Ti gets cut in the leg. You know, does she get chomped down? Does Kit Fisto get killed? You know, and I wanted that to be the case here. You know, I think the battle could have been drawn out a little bit more. I will be honest with you there. I think the battle could have been drawn out a bit more. But in terms of actually building tension, I feel like 2 Jedi had to die, and one of them had to be 3 Jedi, but Obi-Wan had to be one of them. I know we followed the entire story with him. But I kind of did a no time to die kind of thing here where, you know, he finally has everything and he doesn't get to have it. And it's tragic, but it's tragically beautiful because they have a daughter, and that daughter rises to be what Satine was. And that's something I also like to talk about here is the Mandalorian way. Now, I know a lot of you are Mandalorian purists, and that's cool, I understand. It doesn't make sense to me, okay? If you look at Sparta, they lasted for a little bit, and then they didn't. Warrior societies don't work. They just don't. People get pissed off at them because it's like, okay, you just want to fight with us all the time, so we're gonna nuke you. That's why the Empire nuked Mandalore, and it was great, and I loved every second of them getting destroyed because I honestly can't stand it. And I'll be honest with you, I can't stand it. I think Satine is genius because she brought a new era to Mandalore, and her psycho sister ruined it for Mandalore. And that's why Mandalore got nuked by the Empire. Turned to ash. Night of 1,000 Tears, bye-bye Mandalore. So I kind of wanted to stick to Satine being that leader, and that's not even from a point of bias, but if Obi-Wan was with Pre Vizsla, he's not going to let Pre Vizsla just kill Satine in front of him. That's just not who Obi-Wan is. So, in other words, what if Satine at this point was like, okay, well, we got them back on our side, right? And I know people are going to disagree with me that, you know, one of the Mandalorians would be like, no, they would have tried to kill her or something. That's why I say she would have been like, you know what? Maybe I'll do something for you guys. Maybe I'll do something for you guys. And I think something that would be really cool is, you know, gladiatorial ancient combat. You know, it's kind of like, what if we brought back Colosseums without the slavery part? It's kind of cool, but, you know, without killing people. So it would be kind of like that. I guess like the Transformers series does it, like Megatron and the Pits of Kaon, that kind of thing, except they don't try and take over the entire galaxy. So I kind of went with that idea where that's a Transformers reference, by the way, but like having these guys be able to explore and enjoy their ancestral roots by going into the arena and becoming superstars. You know how everyone likes their NFL, their NBA, their MLB, NHL, whatever sport it is that you like, everyone has their favorite superstar from that sport. So I figured, well, what if Mandalore had that kind of system? You know, you had these people that are superstars in their sport. You know, Bo-Katan could be really cool if she was just like a warrior and went down and fought in front of everybody, you know? And I think that would allow Mandalore to actually thrive, where these warriors get to enjoy their warrior traditions without feeling like they can't enjoy them. So regardless of that, there's always like to try. I always like to try and explain the creative decisions I make, so that you guys can see what's going on in my head when I'm writing the story. I always try and do this just so you guys can see what's going on when I'm trying to tell a story and what my thought process is behind it, because I know not most people do that. Regardless, though, I hope you all enjoy these. I love you all. Spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.